Hello, I'm the Sad Panda, and this is the first episode of a new series I'm starting called I Read This, Should You? It's basically a review where I tell you if you should or shouldn't read something based on like a score I give. Obviously, you are free to do what you want, read what you want, obviously, but I just would like to give my opinion because some of these stories I do really enjoy and some of them I do not enjoy and would like people to not read them because they're kind of controversial. But anyways, that's not what I'm here for. What I'm here for is the first story on my list called Chrysalis. It's on Web Novel. You can read it for free right now. It's very good, but we will get on to why it's good and what makes it good in a minute here. And in short, it's an isekai where the main character is reborn as an ant in something called the dungeon. With his new system, he must survive and evolve in an ever-expanding world, which is very true. The world does get larger and larger the more you read. It's very nicely written. Some stuff is kind of repetitive, but we will get to that in the future here. So the first thing I want to talk about is the setting. I just mentioned the dungeon. What is it and how does it come to be? And this is explained a little bit in the first 100 chapters. You would have to read more to get more info. But from what I know, well, from what you would know in the first 100 chapters, is that the easiest way to explain the dungeon is multiple massive underground expanses filled with monsters and mana. And the deeper into the dungeon you go, the more potent the mana and the more powerful the creatures. It's pretty simple to understand. This is pretty basic isekai kind of stuff. And of course, most of the story takes place in the dungeon because our main character, Anthony, is a monstrous ant. So he is a monster in the dungeon, which is one of my favorite takes of this story, is that he's not just a person with like overpowered abilities or whatever. He does have a system, but in this world, everyone has a system, and we will explain what the system is and how it came to be when we get to that. And of course, another one of the main locations is the surface. Makes sense. I mean, you can't talk about a dungeon without talking about the people that go into the dungeon. So some of the story does take place on the surface, but most of it does take place in the dungeon. Now I want to establish the rules of this world that is made apparent in the first 100 chapters, but some of these rules are subject to change, obviously. From what we know in the first 100 chapters is different than what we know now, which I will touch on what we do know now in another video, because I do want to talk about the latest stuff, which I do enjoy. I've been reading this story for about a year, so it's pretty good. And there's a new chapter, I think, once a week or once a day. I don't know for sure. I usually read them in batches, so I don't really know. Anyway, let's start with the system. Every being in this world is born with the system. Now, it's a way to show stats and jobs for humans and mutations and stats for monsters, as well as some other things like your name, your age, that kind of stuff. Your basic video game-esque system. How did it come to be? So as far as we know, in the first 100 chapters, the system came into being the same time the dungeon did. So in this world, there was something called the Rending, which was a cataclysmic event where the dungeon broke the surface for the first time. So before the Rending, no one knew what the dungeon was. The system wasn't a thing, and everyone was just regular people like you or me. But after the dungeon broke, mana flooded the surface, so like people could start getting like their systems or whatever. And according to some historians in the story, people don't know exactly how the system came to be, and records of before the system are few and far between. There's almost no knowledge of the system before. So there's no knowledge of the world before almost. It's like everything came to be at the same time almost, which people obviously want to figure out what happened before. That's basic shit. But other than that, the system is a very unknown. It's just something that exists and everyone has access to it. So it's just an easy way to actually quantify your ability in the world, which they do use, like nobles and stuff. But we'll go past that eventually when we get into the humans. But first, I want to go through the monsters, evolution, and mutation. I do have a script over here, if that's what you're wondering, what I'm looking over every once in a while. These are mostly bulletin points, but I tend to ramble, so I kind of want to keep myself on track here. Evolution and mutation. In this world, monsters are the only ones that can evolve and mutate. So I want to start with mutation because it's easy to explain evolution once we finish explaining mutation. So mutation can be looked at as like an upgrade system for monsters. Monsters must consume biomass, which is any kind of like meat or flesh that you can consume from any other kind of monster. So if you were an ant type monster, which Anthony is, you could kill and eat like a centipede type monster, and you can gain some of its biomass, which you can use to upgrade your like eyes, your antennas, your carapace, your inner bone structure, all of that. It's just, the biomass is upgraded for their individual parts. They're small upgrades, so each one will upgrade only a little bit, but after you have a lot of them, it really adds up. Just like in any video game, if you have a level 1 skill versus a level 30 skill, it's the same difference. Mutations are only limited by evolution. So now that we've talked about mutations, I can talk more about evolution. After you max out your mutations, you can evolve as long as you are your max level. Now, what do I mean by your max level? When you are a monster in this world, there are different tiers. So a monster that hasn't evolved at all is a tier 1 monster, and a monster that has evolved once is a tier 2, and so on and so forth. These are very simple things to understand. What do I get out of this? Each tiered monster has a higher max level than the one before it, making it harder and harder to evolve. So let's say you are a tier 1 monster. Your max level is 5, let's say, at 10. I don't exactly remember what the max level for a tier 1 monster is. But your max mutations, which you can max out, is based on 5 times your level. So if you're a tier 1 monster, you can upgrade your eyes to +5, that kind of thing. And it costs more and more biomass each time to level up. So it just becomes harder and harder as it goes, especially since once you tier up and become a next evolution, right, a tier 2 monster, and you get more mana, more powerful, tier 1 monsters will give you less and less biomass and less XP to level up. So it's almost not worth punching down, so to speak. So if you're a tier 5 monster and you're killing tier 1s, it doesn't pay. You'll get less biomass from 1,000 tier 1s than 10 tier 5s. It's just innumerable the amount of difference that it is. Really hard to evolve and change as you go. So I want to talk about humans now. Humans do not get to evolve, as we talked about, and they don't get to do mutations. But what they do have is jobs. Or I guess jobs or titles or whatever. When you're a human in this world, you have the ability to gain stats passively. So a monster only gains stats when it evolves. So even if you're max mutations, your stats won't change. So let's say you have a 10 in might, which is one of the stats in this, and you have max mutations, you will still only have a 10 in might, but you'll just be able to utilize your body better, essentially. So humans get to kill monsters and gain stats based on leveling up and all that, and jobs will change how much you get. So if you have a job that is like a royal knight or something like that, you will gain more stats per level than if you were a farmer with a farmer system, because everyone has their own system in this world, so everyone can gain stats. It's just not easy for humans because you have to have certain jobs, and in order to have certain jobs you have to have a certain like ranks in like the military and other things like that. These are super easy to understand now that we've talked about the system, we've talked about mutations and evolutions, we talked about humans. Now I want to talk about the plot a little bit, and this is all based on memory because I haven't read the beginning in a long time, but I do remember that in the beginning, most of the story revolves around something called the wave. So these things happen from time to time in the dungeon where mana will increase exponentially from what it normally is. So I want to explain the dungeon a little bit more while we talk about the mana. Because as I said before, the deeper into the dungeon you go, the more mana you have, or the more mana is available to you. And the dungeon is split into like tiers. I'm not going to tell you what all of the tiers are, but they are split into tiers called strata. And the deeper in the dungeon you go, so like strata 2, strata 3, the more potent the mana is, so the more powerful the creatures are, even at tier 1. So a tier 1 third strata monster could probably beat a tier 3 first strata monster, because they're just more potent mana and they have more energy to evolve with and more energy to create their bodies with, because that's how this how the dungeon works. Because all the monsters are made in the dungeon. They're not like born. Some of them are. We'll get to ants in a second, because that's a big thing with this story specifically, is how people deal with the ants and how people think about the ants compared to other monsters. You know what? I want to go through that right now, because I really enjoy that. No, I won't. We're gonna continue with the strata stuff. So the deeper in the dungeon you go, the more potent the mana is, and so something happens in this story called the wave. It's where mana levels will reach insane heights in the higher strata. So strata 1 will have like strata 3 mana. So if you go even further down, it's even more intense. And so it makes the dungeon spawn more and more monsters. And what people don't want is a dungeon break, which is where once the monsters reach a critical mass in their strata, their instinct is to go up. So if you are from strata 3, you want to go to 2. If you're from 2, you want to go to 1. If you're from 1, you want to go to the surface. I don't know why this is. It just is what it is. But so the first 100 chapters revolve around something called the wave, which is happening. It's something that happens every like 100 years or something like that. It's not something that happens all the time, from what we know. And Anthony has to survive being just born as a baby monster ant, so about the size of like a pug. He has to survive in this crazy world that doesn't make any sense to him. And there's some comedy elements that I find really fun, like him trying to run away and stuff, because he is an ant. He doesn't, and he is by himself when he's born, which, unlike regular ants, they're born usually in a colony with thousands, if not millions, of siblings that are all trying to do the same thing, which is survive and all that kind of stuff. But when he awakes, he is by himself, which kind of sucks if you're an ant in a world that is massive. The wave is starting. He's trying to find his family, because obviously he's an ant, so he has to have like a queen. He has to have sisters. That is, all ants are female. Even though he identifies as a male, his body is technically a female, because all ants, besides like a few, like are female. I don't know if you know that, but that's just is what it is. Anyways, so the whole thing is him trying to get to there, trying to evolve and max out his mutations, and in doing so, develop a core. Now, what is a core? Now, monsters in this world, when you evolve enough or have enough mana, you can condense it into a core. And what does a core do? It gives you more energy for when you evolve. When you evolve, you only have a set amount of energy, and once you use it all, you can't upgrade your body anymore. So if you have more and more energy, you will have more or better evolutions available to you. Anthony, of course, doesn't know this, so his first evolution is wasted, but after that, it's good to go. That is most of the plot for the first 100 or so chapters. There's some things that do change, like after you evolve enough, you do want to go deeper into the dungeon, because you can't sustain your body at higher points of the dungeon, but that is all later stuff. Now, what would I recommend? Why would I recommend this story to you? Because one, it's a good read, and it's very polished. There's obviously going to be, in like a web novel, there's going to be some like errors and spelling and stuff, but that is not all the fault of like the author or whatever. This is just like stuff that slips through editing, just like anything that happens in real life. Even in real books, you sometimes see like misspellings and stuff. That is just is what it is. It's a real book. It's the same thing as everyone else. I would give for plot I would give it like an 8 out of 10, because there are some things that I wish they would wrap up. There's sometimes they don't explore what's going on outside enough, in my opinion. I like the side stories. That's something that this author does, Rinoz. They usually, when our main character evolves, which isn't a short process, Like, it's a changing of your entire body structure, so it's not a short process. In these times, they usually will go through the eyes of like other characters, and you don't meet a whole lot of other characters because most of the characters that our main character surrounds itself with is ants, and most of the ants are nameless and that kind of stuff. But there is some fun stuff, like later on there's Anthony, being who he is, like the main character of the story, does end up being like almost like the queen. After finding his family, he is able to modify cores at a certain point, and he modifies his queen's core, which modifies all of the ant species and changes the species to a more intelligent type of ant. And this is actually where I'm gonna talk about, before I give my final stuff, I want to talk about the way people see ants in this story. Mostly because ants aren't very powerful. Obviously, their power comes in number. So ants can multiply hundreds of thousands, millions per day. So it can be extremely scary for humans to think that an ant colony has begun to exist in the dungeon. Because if, let's say, 1 million ants were to attack even the most powerful warriors, they will get overrun eventually, because that's what ants do best. They just throw themselves at the enemy over and over again until they die. And Anthony, in changing the core, changes how these ants operate, and they're more intelligent. They try to operate under the radar. Very fun stuff. Honestly, just read the story. It's very good. I enjoy it a lot. I do tend to ramble when I talk about stuff that I enjoy, get sidetracked and stuff, but this is just how it is. This is how my videos are going to be from this point on. I do plan on doing this probably once every couple days, probably every other day, because these scripts do take some time to write. I also got to read the stuff. So right now I have like a backlog of stuff that I have read, so we're good there. I'm also reading new stuff, which will help in the future when I need to review them. But for now, I do think that Chrysalis is worth your read. I would give it an 8 out of 10. So like, the story is good, and it keeps getting good. And I think the author has a very good idea what he's doing, and they're just very consistent in writing. Give it an 8 out of 10. I said that already. I keep repeating myself, but I just can't get over how much I like this story. It's not the best story I've ever read, obviously. I give that to like One Piece. It's insane. I'll probably talk about One Piece later. I'm fully caught up, so whatever. After this video, I'm probably going to post like a side video of Chrysalis about what's happening in the newest chapters and all that stuff. But until then, I want you to take a second and just read it. Just sit down and read it. And obviously, if it's not your cup of tea, don't read all of it. But I recommend it. I mean, if you like isekai, you'll probably like it. Like, I like isekai anime. I love isekai manga. So I love it. So it works for me. But it obviously isn't for everyone. But I do want more people to read this. Even though it is one of the highest ranking stories on the power ranking in Web Novel, the app, I still think it is underappreciated with how good it is. It is very consistent, and I just think everyone should give it a read. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. But if not, leave me a comment. Or if you do like it, leave me a comment. I will read all of them and respond to all of them. So please, I'm trying to get to 10 subscribers. So let's do it.